For over 30 years, one website has quietly shaped an entire generation of animators, game developers, and internet artists, operating before YouTube, social media, content creators, and even the internet itself. Today, I want to tell you the story of Newgrounds. Its journey from a paper and ink fanzine in 1991 to the unlikely survivor that still stands at the center of independent animation today, and how it defined the look and attitudes of early internet culture that are still felt today. We'll be looking at the people, creators, and controversy that made the site what it is. So sit back as I regale to you the history of Newgrounds. This video is long, but I'll still have to skim over a bunch of features. But if you think I missed something important, please feel free to let me know. There's so much info, it's pretty much impossible to catch it all. Also, if you like the video, remember to subscribe. It helps me make more content like this, because God knows sponsors are not affiliating with this shit. So without further ado, grab your oversized grunge t-shirt and pre-9/11 travel bag, because we're heading back to the 1990s.
I did not.
Back at the start of the 90s, the internet didn't really work like the internet we know today. This was before the World Wide Web provided a fluid, interconnected browsing experience. So websites were isolated to their own servers, often made and run by single individuals around a very niche topic. For reference, I'm using this iconic internet tutorial video as stock, but this video is too advanced. Fucking Netscape Navigator didn't come out until like 1995, 4 years later. To get online, you needed an online network service.
Prodigy, the network of active minds.
Prodigy was an online network service that gave users access to a bunch of basic services, like email and message boards within the network. One of these many niche message boards would be focused on the then very topical home console, the Neo Geo, made by the Japanese SNK Corporation. Who the fuck are they? They were recently bought by the Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia. Inshallah, Takeshi-san. At this stage, we meet Tom Fulp, a Philadelphia-born 13-year-old who had spent the past few years acquainting himself with the internet on his parents' basement computer. As he entered his teenage years, Tom had realized his two loves for art and technology. Hence, he was drawn to message boards like the one focused on the Neo Geo. Within the Prodigy network, it was common for smaller clubs to break away into even smaller message boards, or migrate to email chains. We don't know exactly what happened, but Fulp described himself eventually belonging to a club focused on the Neo Geo, where he sat as the incumbent president. It's unknown who preceded or succeeded him. The club was named the Neo Geo Alliance. That's a pretty badass name. For this club, Tom would make a fanzine, that's just a homemade magazine to all of you under the age of 15, about upcoming Neo Geo news, trivia, and reviews that he would send to members who subscribed, of which around 100 did. The zine, titled Newground, which from what I can tell seems to be mostly lost, is generally what you would expect from a 13-year-old in his basement. But you can clearly see Fulp's creative sensibilities shining through, with the title logo seemingly designed from scratch, and some of the layout choices radiating just a smidge of what would later be seen on early Newgrounds. The zine's name was a play on the name of the Neo Geo. Neo meaning new, and Geo being the ancient Greek origin for ground. I did notice one fascinating tidbit. The zine was heavily built upon club submissions, and Tom requests contributions on an Alliance-specific news article. And here he credits someone called Casey Lowe as coming up with the Newground name. I looked into if Casey Lowe was anyone of note relating to Newgrounds, but nothing came up. From what I can tell, this random person belonging to a Neo Geo fan club in 1991 is single-handedly responsible for the name that would later become Newgrounds. Only one issue of the zine has been posted online, and the content of all the others is likely lost to time. If anyone has any knowledge of where another could be, these are unironically pretty important documents for internet history. Or even better, DM me with a quote so I can own it. We don't know how many issues the zine ran for, but it came to an end sometime between 1991 and 1995. In 1993, Futurewave would release the first version of what would eventually become Flash. Originally just a drawing application, the feature for frame-based animation would be added sometime later, allowing users to animate their drawings, all from the comfort of a personal computer. Whilst not the first digital animation tool, it was certainly the most accessible, and therefore would soon eclipse competing software for the spot of the digital animation program. Following the dissolution of the Alliance, Tom would set his sights on leaving his mark on this new type of internet, with his next major project being a series of games for his brother's BBS service. A BBS, or Bulletin Board System, is a text-based website. I know that's a simplification, I can fucking hear you guys below. Actually, you need a port number, shut up. He also set up his own webpage named after his iconic fanzine, titled Newground Remix. The site was a general depository for whatever content interested Fulp, as was the case with most personal web pages of the 90s. It saw little traffic outside of Tom's immediate circle of friends. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. This would continue to be the case for the following year up until the summer of 1996, when Tom would release the first version of Club a Seal to the Remix site. Tom was inspired to make the game after watching a National Geographic program of an Inuit clubbing a seal to death, with he himself not condoning the act.
One day my dad turned on National Geographic and they were actually showing seal clubbing on National Geographic, and my mom told him to change the channel, but he didn't, and then I watched as like a seal got clubbed, and it really made me upset. So I think that just inspired me, when the web came along, it was just like, what's something horrific I can make, and that was like the top of my list.
There appears to be a lot of confusion around the various clubbing seal versions, with different sources claiming the game came out in different years. On top of this, many versions of the game have been erased due to copyrighted images, and some, like the true 96 original, are just so old I don't think they actually exist anymore. In the fall of 1996, an 18-year-old Tom would leave home to study IT at the University of Drexel. Go Dragons. At Drexel, Tom no longer had access to the same computer network as the one in his parents' basement, and was blocked from editing the site so long as he was using a university IP. With no other choice, Tom just decided to fucking duplicate the Newgrounds site. Employing perhaps the most 90s terminology, Newground Atomics was born. The Atomics site would host articles, updates, and Phelps rudimentary games. One of note being Assassin, where you would kill PNGs of famous characters and celebrities. Just look at this absolute cinema. The game was controversial enough to gain ire from The Scotsman, a Scottish newspaper which called out the Assassin game and claimed it was corrupting the youth and filling their little brains with murderous intent. To which Tom responded with an appropriately late 90s zinger-filled retort: Bazinga! Atomics also served as a hub for Tom's other websites, such as Teletubby Funland. Let's see what's going on over here. Okay. Teletubby Funland was actually the first real controversy Tom would encounter, save for the very minor scuffle with the Scottish newspaper, which at the time statistically was run by at least 2.5 people on heroin. The BBC, who owned the Teletubbies, first reached out to Fulp for unknown reasons, leading to him scrambling to change every mention of a copyrighted character on the site. This first instance was a false alarm, with the BBC just wanting to interview Tom about Club a Seal. But later on, they would actually crack down on the site, resulting in some temporary significant changes to the names and likenesses of the featured tubbies. In 1998, Tom would move into a private apartment with dial-up internet instead of BBS. For you Zoomers, dial-up was marginally better, but if someone tried to use the landline at the same time, the network shat itself. Mom, I don't care that Aunt Hilda is dying! I'm trying to surf the Netscape! With the swanky new dial-up, Tom attempted to phase out the older Remix site by directing all traffic over to Atomics. Despite his best efforts, the older site would continue to be more popular, and so for the time being, the two-site system remained. That September, he received a call from Inside Edition, who wanted to do a story on his controversial Assassin game series. It could be assumed that the story was going to be critical of the game and spin it into some broader, look at the fucking evil kids are exposed to online bit. But as had already been proven, Tom was always prepared to defend his games from larger publications. Understanding that this story would probably be the biggest piece of PR his site would ever get, he decided to optimize its name and URL so that anyone viewing in the age before pausing live TV could quickly see what the site was called and go check it out for themselves. And so finally, Tom landed on the name Newgrounds.com. simplifying everything that had come before. Despite eventually never being featured on Inside Edition, traffic for Newgrounds increased, thanks to him redirecting to the site from all his other websites. The growth of Newgrounds soon exceeded Tom's available funds, and while ads would typically be the solution to this, the controversy surrounding the games like Assassin made most advertisers reluctant to support the site. It's funny considering how tame this violence is by comparison of what would come later, but you gotta think back to the 90s, when violence in media was like the single biggest issue facing the country. Thankfully, completely out of left field, Troma Entertainment would partner with Tom to host Newgrounds for a share of revenue. Troma was primarily a film studio, best known for, I don't fucking know, this shit.
This is an American-made car. Every time they flip 25 feet in the air and crash down, they blow up. Let's get out of here.
They're also unique for using your mother in their logo. They would host Newgrounds on their New York servers, giving the site far more room to grow, while the minuscule Newgrounds team continued work in Philadelphia. Troma went so far as to fly Tom out to LA to cameo in one of their films. That clip I showed, that's Tom, that's the guy.
Oh, well, I guess everyone's a critic.
In 1999, Tom made Pico School, based off the then very topical Columbine shooting. The game, for what it was a technical achievement given the limitations of Flash at the time. When looking at various discussions of the game, people talk about it like it's the most offensive thing to ever exist. I appreciate this was pretty edgy considering, you know, the year, but like looking back, this is nothing. Shit gets way worse. As the Newgrounds website grew in popularity, users began reaching out with their own Flash projects, hoping to get them featured on the site alongside Tom's own projects. Alongside Newgrounds proper, Tom had made a sister site called The Portal for all his projects that were either unfinished or not good enough for the main website. He began to use The Portal as a place for other users to also host their projects, making one of the first websites for community-created content. Bringing in help from his friends, the website would see steady improvements over the course of 2000, culminating in the reinvention of The Portal, merging it with Newgrounds, where the updated system would allow users to submit their projects without Tom's direct involvement. Newgrounds is sometimes misattributed as the first video sharing platform. This isn't true, as sites like Share Your World had been operating for some years before, but streaming as we currently know it on places like YouTube was still years away. You had to manually download that 440p Avril Lavigne concert footage. The advantage Newgrounds had was Flash. Because of how the site worked, Flash files were extremely small, so you could pretty much watch animations and play games uninterrupted while browsing the site. Despite the revolutionary introduction of the portal, the most important visual change of the year would be to the site's logo. Tom hired his friend Andrew J. Brosnia to create a new, unique logo to represent the site in the new millennium, and so Newgrounds received its first little tank, and Tankman to ride atop. Things are looking up! What could possibly go wrong on the internet in the year 2000? Following the dot-com bubble, Newgrounds emerged as one of the few survivors. The following months would be some of the hardest faced by the site, largely because the internet as a concept was sort of imploding. To keep revenue and the site flowing, Tom made a devil's bargain with a contact in LA, who had recently been let go when his own website went under. He wanted to make a website that would be what Newgrounds was for edgy content, but for porn. This idea didn't go anywhere, but it did inspire Tom to introduce invasive but lucrative site adverts for adult content. If Newgrounds tells me there are MILFs in the area, oh boy, someone hold my Wacom. I'm going out tonight. Put in a section about how webcams were a part of the site. The webcams weren't just ads, by the way. They were a part of the site, nestled between literature and the portal. Where are the demands for this beloved feature to return? I mean, come on, guys. Okay, admittedly, these webcams were mainly for creators to connect with fans, and not necessarily porn. But looking at these thumbnails, let's just say Newgrounds webcams walked so Twitch Hot Tub could run. I also noticed that in 2002, the site had a theme song, and it slaps. On a Reddit AMA from 2009, Fulp described this period as his mum on a stripper pole era, which is very fucking funny and also I think illustrates the love he had for the site. It's clear he saw Newgrounds as his baby, hence his resistance to sell it and willingness to keep it alive no matter the cost. For the next couple of years, the site continued to steadily grow, introducing more features and ultimately incurring more fees to network providers. However, the site's hosting was still made possible with the partnership to Troma. This partnership wouldn't last much longer, however, as by 2003, Troma let Newgrounds go, effectively leaving them to fend for themselves in probably the most volatile internet that would ever exist. Now, Tom claims that both prior to and following the 2001 bubble, multiple companies had reached out attempting to acquire Newgrounds, probably to turn it into a iFunny clone. Tom has stated that some of these offers were substantial enough to set him up for life, and has implied were more money than everything he's made off the site even to today. It's undeniable Newgrounds would have become a very different website if it were under the control of a large corporation. In all honesty, it probably wouldn't even exist anymore, because it wouldn't be generating $100 billion a day. In February of 2001, Newgrounds user Bad Cirque uploaded a video edit of a drum and bass song that remixed an infamously mistranslated line from the 1989 game Zero Wing.
All your bass, all your bass, does belong to us.
The video took off on Newgrounds and soon spread across the interweb, with the video stolen and re-uploaded everywhere possible, but an unmistakable trail leading all curious back to the original Newgrounds video.
The song was used in a Flash animation that included the Zero Wing clip and a Rafflecopter slideshow of all your base Photoshop jobs. This would become the definitive version of All Your Base.
In 2002, Tom would finally graduate and begin development of a Flash game with Dan Paladin, another Flash game developer, with the game in question planned to be the biggest seen on Newgrounds yet, named Alien Hominid, taking full advantage of recent updates to Flash. They would formalize their game development efforts by forming the Behemoth, a San Diego-based dev team who would continue to work on Alien Hominid, while Newgrounds would continue to be based in Philadelphia. In April of that year, the site would experience another minor controversy when user Fabulous999 uploaded Kaboom, later renamed to just the Suicide Bomber game, a game where you take control of a suicide bomber. The game received international coverage for its content, however the creator refused to take it down, claiming it was in fact meant to show the futility of suicide bombers. See, it was a really deep game, from the creator of Detroit Cop. Despite the negative coverage, the game stayed up on the site, and is still playable today. In mid-2003, a random user of the site, with no clear monetary incentive, surprised Tom and the Newgrounds staff by sending them a full redesign of the front page, refreshing the charming but antiquated site design into the cutting edge of 2003 Windows XP web design. Who was this mystery web designer? A powerful man named William Andrew Stamper. This redesign is really where the Newgrounds look that survived until today originated from. The iconic grey and yellow 16-bit inspired affair, the redesign also marks the first clear example of users being uniquely valued within the site's community, with Stamper, who up until now had been a complete unknown, was brought on to update the website page by page from his home in Florida. In early 2004, Stamper moved up to Philadelphia to work full-time at Newgrounds.
Hello, I like rusty spoons.
On the 1st of July 2004, Newgrounds user Doki, real name David Firth, uploaded a Flash animation titled Salad Fingers. The unsettling animation focused on the antics of the titular Salad Fingers, and his strange, nonsensical adventures in an ominously esoteric wasteland. The animation was an immediate hit on Newgrounds, with users immediately falling in love with the creepy atmosphere and unsettling art style. It wouldn't take long for the animation to break free of Newgrounds, appearing on file-sharing sites and email chains. As it drifted further from its source, its mysterious aura only grew, until it became essentially an early creepypasta. Yeah, if you didn't know where this animation came from, I too would probably think it was cursed. Salad Fingers was the first true example of Newgrounds' ability to springboard animation into popular culture.
Oh my god.
When the red water comes.
I just don't.
Up until that point, online animation had the vibes of novelty, short-lived gags. Not to say early animations didn't take an immense amount of effort to make, but Salad Fingers demonstrated the innovative potential online animation truly had. You could make a sincere artistic project, and who knows, maybe it just might get popular. And 2 decades later, people will be making epic theory videos about it.
Salad Fingers sacrifices an old finger puppet, burying it in the ground. What's especially interesting is that this puppet, named Melvin Wishcake, is someone brand new to the series.
Okay, admittedly, theory crafting would be integral to the series' longevity over the following years, and Firth would intentionally create a lore of sorts to be analysed. Following the first Salad Fingers success on Newgrounds, Firth would continue to produce Salad Fingers videos, up until 2025, still using Newgrounds as a base for uploads. At the end of the year, Alien Hominid released in the US, reviewing positively and undoubtedly bringing more traffic to the Newgrounds site and the Behemoth, who soon set their sights on the next big project. At the very end of the year, the iconic Numa Numa dance would be uploaded to the site. Probably the most culturally significant piece of media to ever be posted there. I know someone's gonna bring up some cartoon that changed everything, but if we're talking about global impact, the effect of this video is probably responsible for introducing the concept of a viral video, and the first example of something birthed from the internet dominating global popular culture.
It all began with that wild and wacky online performance by a North Jersey teenager.
Well, this is how a star is born these days. 19-year-old Gary Brolsma is an international hit with his incredible Numa Numa dance.
I honestly think this video is the inflection point where entertainment as a whole realized the internet was the next major frontier. In April the following year, the site would be rebranded to Newgrounds. During the little golden zone right before Numa Numa became ironically cringe, some years later the higher-ups at Newgrounds decided to manually remove the video, in an effort to, and I quote, focus on animation. 2005, or post-stamperization as Tom puts it, is when I consider the second age of the website started. starting. The golden age, if you like to use overused garbage terminology. What I mean by this is that the key developmental and explorational phases of the site were behind them. Newgrounds now had a firm identity and purpose, with games, animation, and the portal tying everything together. At the same time, the community was now taking shape. Granted, before the site definitely had a dedicated portion of fans, but now that less so resembled a niche of game-minded web users who shared around the funny URL, but more so a website community as most would understand it in the modern day. So less of a club, quote unquote, but more of a very big frat house. Rent could barely be paid and people were on the spare couch. Okay, you get the metaphor. That May, Tom would appear as the co-host on perhaps the most 2005 show to ever exist, Attack of the Show. He featured in 4 episodes, giving his hot takes on pop culture, plugging Newgrounds as much as possible, and very surprisingly, not being cringe.
You're excited about Tom Fulp. Mr. Tom Fulp joining us on the show all week.
Tom. Great to be here.
It is an honor to be basking in your presence. You have beautiful skin, and you also have an amazing website that was really the only site that I ever cared to visit. That was the reason I installed Flash. I'm just going to say it flat out. Newgrounds.com. What's the Newgrounds? If you could describe it in a sentence or two for the kids at home.
To sum it up, basically the original biggest Flash community on the internet is how over 100 submissions a day, most of them get deleted by the users. The cream of the crop rises to the top, and you get your daily entertainment.
I really thought this was going to be hard to watch, but for some reason, Tom Fulp, of all people, was able to do what no internet personality has done since. Actually appear natural and charismatic on broadcast TV. In October of 2005, Newgrounds would be given its first dedicated office space for all the miscellaneous employees to centralize around and give the whole operation a new sense of professionalism. A year before, all the servers previously located in New York under the guard of Troma had been shipped up to Philadelphia, giving staff direct access to every aspect of the site. This beautiful video exists of the staff renovating the office, mainly by tearing down walls to make an open plan space like every 2000s tech startup. This is the first time the Newgrounds community would be acquainted with Stamper's penis, a character William would later share with the world. Also present in the video is one Jeff Bandelin, better known as Johnny Utah, who had been hired by Newgrounds as one of the first dedicated staff artists. He was hired after winning an animation contest for the Opie and Anthony show. This award-winning animation sadly no longer exists. His first major visual contribution would be a redesign of the site's logo, giving it the visual profile that is stuck around until today. In my research, I did find this post from Wade Fulp from a few months before, advertising an Opie and Anthony website where women can show off their boobs. Very classy. Despite the boob website advertisements and fucking of office debris, it was clear Newgrounds was entering a new stage in its life, and the biggest signifier of this was a change to the site's iconic motto, to a more woke, art-positive one. Newgrounds. Everything by everyone. It reflected Newgrounds' transition from Tom's personal site into a platform for creators. Maybe this change of slogan put a curse on the website, as the following years would be defined by struggle. Admittedly, the old one did sound like it belonged to a violent manifesto. The visual changes combined with the new slogan, in my view, represented the cultural changes of the time, from being a part of counterculture to the era of the internet becoming cool. At the time, Facebook was exploding, and the global population was realizing that the internet was no longer just a place for taxes and porn. At the end of 2006, the site celebrated Pico Day, named after the Pico character, who the Newgrounds staff treated as a sort of unofficial official mascot. This first event consisted of just a light site rebrand and a competition based around the character, with various cash prizes to be given out. But in the following years, this event would grow in scale to be one of the biggest website-centric yearly events, eventually dropping the Pico connection in all but name, and just being more of a generic yearly celebration, inviting major users of the site to the Newgrounds HQ to hang out, network, and allegedly in 2007, the site received another redesign, but the biggest project of the year would be the development of the behemoth's second major game, Castle Crashers, which statistically you the viewer have played. The 2.5D 4-player beat-em-up would release the following year exclusively for the Xbox 360, and over the following years the game would be incredibly successful, being ported to a multitude of major other platforms, and generally accepted as the Behemoth's greatest game up until today. Speaking of Xbox, Alien Hominid released on the Xbox Live Arcade, which for you kids was basically an Xbox store for really small indie games. 80% of the stuff on there was literally like Roblox tier shitty mini games. To help cement the community spirit of the site, 2007 would be the first year where physical trophies were given out to users who had won site-specific awards. The awards would be split across multiple categories: Video of the Year, 2 for Game of the Year, split between art design and programming, Best Song, and Leadership. That would soon be simplified to User of the Year.
Tomer used to be the voice actor of Newgrounds, like he was in everything. User of the Year 2009.
Wait, were you really?
Yeah, I have a tank in my... Jesus loves you!
Yes.
The trophies were cast in solid-ass bronze, and according to Tom, cost 500 American pounds to produce each, or just under 800 in today's economy. Due to the price, the two separate game awards would later be condensed into one, which low-key is understandable. As with any awards, the system would run into controversy down the line, with users often believing the winners of a given category weren't as deserving as another user, for a multitude of reasons. The most high-profile of these disagreements came in 2009, when musician Hania won Best Musician, leading to one of the moderators of the site to vocalize his displeasure at the winner, before making an apology soon after. 2007 would see the upload of probably the most controversial game ever put up on Newgrounds, VTech Rampage, based on the then very topical Virginia Tech shooting. The game was extremely controversial when released, even on Newgrounds, with some saying it was in extremely bad taste, and others saying it was an absolute lolfest. One obviously has to draw parallels between this game and Pico's School. Both depict similar events, and were made shortly after major incidents. I think what sets them apart is Pico's School is highly fictional and maintains a silly tone throughout, whereas in Rampage, you play out the events of the incident. Surprisingly, the only issues the game ran into were a claim of copyrighted music, resulting in changes to the game's audio. Still keeping with the Newgrounds creed, the game was allowed to stay up, and is still playable today. In late 2007, Newgrounds rolled out their first form of content monetization, through which creators could earn revenue from their videos. The system would undergo many iterations, but the basic concept allowed users to monetize their creations both on the Newgrounds site and on any other website where the Flash might be featured. As you can imagine, the introduction of ads, even ones that were very non-intrusive by today's standards, was met with significant grumbling from the community. The system may have been a direct response to YouTube's own partner program, which used a similar model to let users profit from their content. This isn't a history of YouTube, so I'm going to try to avoid mentioning them as much as possible, but around this period is when YouTube would explode in popularity, becoming the single biggest competitor to Newgrounds. In March of 2008, the first iteration of Super Meat Boy would be released. The game was instantly a hit on the site, being more or less perfectly optimized for a Newgrounds game, with its fast pace and relative simplicity, allowing for players to easily make their own maps and share them around, ensuring the little game had an insane amount of longevity. The success of Meat Boy led the creators to make a full expanded spin-off called Super Meat Boy and ship the game over to the Xbox Live Arcade. The first iteration of Meat Boy would be released. For the rest of 2008, the site generally continued as normal, with the biggest event behind the scenes being the continued development of Castle Crashers, which would release that August, where it reviewed positively.
It's definitely gonna have some depth to it as well. Certainly pick up Castle Crashers, it's worth every penny.
And once again, the devs at the Behemoth set their gaze on the next, even more ambitious project. In November of 2008, Newgrounds user Newgrounds announced on their page that they were working on a Newgrounds documentary to be titled Everything by Everyone, that would cover the 15-year history of Newgrounds and be a love letter to the many artists who had built the site into what it was today.
If these kids fucking keep working it, they could jump off of what we're doing and just blow right past us.
The Crown posted updates about ongoing interviews with notable Newgrounds figures, filmed over the duration of the summer of 2009. He would even set up a dedicated website that now leads to an Indonesian gambling page. What? There would also be a Kickstarter in early 2010, receiving over $15,000 from over 200 backers. Updates continued through until 2013, and then nothing. For unknown reasons, the project disappeared without warning, leaving its supporters confused and understandably upset that their money had vanished alongside the documentary's creator. It's not known what happened to the project. The two major theories seem to be a simple case of taking the money and running, or that the creator bit off more than he could chew, and realized that the scope of such a project was beyond his skill set, and the $15,000 he was given. Going off the few interviews he actually carried out, and the website and trailer that actually exist, I doubt that this was an outright scam, even though it doesn't explain why you would vanish without a trace. Even shitting out a cut-down version of the project would be acceptable to most, if you were honest and explained the reality of the situation. Oh no, instead of a full comprehensive documentary, we're just getting a little celebration of Newgrounds, full of creator interviews and behind the scenes trivia. Do you see what I mean? Running, especially after taking donations, is just inexcusable. Around mid-2009, the fourth major portal was released onto Newgrounds. This one dedicated to art. It could be 2D, 3D, wholesome, or vicious porn. So long as it could be smushed into a PNG, it was viable for upload. This would be the last current portal added to the site. Ever since the addition of the art portal in 2009, there have been talks ever since of the addition of a writing portal for people to submit literature. There have been rumours and sporadic updates about its alleged development, but the way things on the site are now, and with the abundance of dedicated writing websites, I can't imagine much of a need for one. At the same time, the Newgrounds forums have their own dedicated writing space, so a whole ass portal wouldn't really serve any purpose other than rounding out the art quadfecta the site already provides. Mentions of sexism, racism, religious persecution, abuse, or sexual abuse can be allowed as long as used for plot purposes, and not to spread any sort of propaganda or defense of such kinds of acts. Wow, where do they find the rules to my comments section? Around the same time, the medal system would be first introduced, simulating achievements with games that would save to each profile. While we're in 2009, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Sir Tom93 incident. In March, Newgrounds user Sir Tom93 began making threats on the Newgrounds forums that he was planning to burn down his school in Norfolk. That's this area and one of the places where people still their siblings. While Newgrounds users weren't above laughing at school tragedies, they weren't gonna sit back and let one occur. And so calls began rolling into the local police, and Sir Tom was arrested before school, in possession of materials necessary to start a fire. This entire event took place within an hour, and Sir Tom then spent time in prison followed by a mental hospital. Why is the news article on the wiki the most British thing? Written by John Troup. The lad's 16. In 2017, a Newgrounds user would claim to have made contact with Tom. I wish I could say the story had a happy ending, but sadly it was revealed he had moved to Australia. Burn your school down, fucking Bunzer, or dear mate. This brings us to 2010, and this period, in my opinion, could be described as a dark age for the site. Now, I can hear some people commenting, "No, my favorite animation was posted during this time. The site was at its peak." But in the grand scheme of the internet, Newgrounds was unfortunately losing a lion's share of the influence it had once had on the internet, going from one of the most recognizable sites online to a place you would maybe go to find an old cartoon, if it hadn't been put up on YouTube yet. Also, yeah, YouTube. I mentioned YouTube before, but I'll just elaborate further. YouTube had very quickly become the biggest video sharing site on the internet, and animators had quickly taken notice. The far superior AdSense program made YouTube far more appealing, and the process of converting Flash animations to MP4s only took minutes. Like every animator I've covered had the exact same section of, in 2009 or 2010, they started their own YouTube. It was, for lack of a better words, a migration. Even though converted Flashes on YouTube would be far lower quality, it was a small price to pay for the allure of that sweet, sweet revenue. The best Newgrounds could hope for was that animators would be uploading to both sites.
Hey there, everybody at Newgrounds.com. Knuckles and I are here to talk to you about the newest volume of Sonic Shorts.
And to Newgrounds' credit, their non-existent censorship meant that many ruder cartoons would have to exclusively be posted on the site, with only a trailer or heavily censored version available on YouTube. This doesn't even cover the epidemic of art theft from Newgrounds, where users either naively or outright maliciously would see a funny Newgrounds flash, stick it up on the tube, and collect the revenue, back when it was far harder to claim a video using your content.
The rest of the film's gone! What? Where'd it go? Heh, now to upload this to YouTube!
At the same time, Flash sites were booming among younger internet users. And for older users, 2010 was around the time console gaming became affordable, and PC gaming really became a thing, with neon fans and running Mass Effect 2 and Windows 7. And so the next decade, in my opinion, was a fight for relevance, and a fight to find a new identity on a netscape that no longer had a place for sites like Newgrounds. By 2010, Newgrounds was effectively doing as much as was possible for a site at the time. Art, animation, video, forums, profile pages. The breadth of features naturally made the site a pain to update and maintain. Throughout this time, a comprehensive redesign of the site was planned. However, with all the different elements to account for, this project would span multiple years. And with most of the work taking place behind the scenes, understandably many users interpreted this as inactivity. Early in 2010, the forums saw a small overhaul to allow for more sections, and also the introduction of the wiki, where one could easily find info on the site and the people behind it. It's what I'm currently stealing the script from. Wait, what? In 2011, Newgrounds created a YouTube channel to take advantage of the far superior monetization the site provided. This is f***ing hilarious. It's unclear if the original plan was to solely advertise the main site, or to genuinely try and turn a profit from animations. They posted a selection of the most popular and high quality animations available on the site, and these official re-uploads did numbers. Undoubtedly more than was possible on Newgrounds. On the wiki, Tom directly states that this whole scheme was meant to be a way to funnel YouTube revenue back to Newgrounds to make more high quality animations, that I assume would then be uploaded back onto YouTube, and you can see the cycle develop. Unfortunately, YouTube cancelled their AdSense, presumably due to Newgrounds being a competitor. In September, the iconic Meat Boy creator Edmund McMillan unveiled his next major project with a demo on Newgrounds. Called The Binding of Isaac, the game quickly gained a cult following thanks to its dark tone and replayability. And so, like Meat Boy, he decided to turn this demo into a full game. And The Binding of Isaac released a few months later on Steam. The series' true explosion in popularity would come a few years later, with The Binding of Isaac Rebirth, which released for every major console and the PlayStation Vita. In late 2011, Newgrounds began to roll out Swivel, a tool that converted SWF flash files into MP4s. It had been possible for some time to convert flash animations, but this tool aimed to make it possible to convert on a massive scale. Now, people often assume this was due to the iconic flash discontinuation, but you have to remember that was still years away. The real reason was just that flash was slowly beginning to break. Flash depended on multiple things: the plugin, the operating system, and of course the browser being used. By 2011, many browsers were deprioritizing flash. Firefox infamously made every effort to block it. Chrome had a malware fit, and it just didn't work on Safari, with Steve Jobs writing a whole ass vent post as to why he despised Flash. As browsers continue to update, the patchwork nature of old SWF files led to things breaking, and a general decrease in the user experience. Swivel therefore hoped to provide a solution, albeit many of the flashes would lose interactivity. At the start of 2012, Newgrounds would get blacked by taking part in the mass protest against the Stop Online Piracy Act and the Protect IP Act. The gist of these laws was that websites themselves would be responsible for the actions of users, and all content uploaded. It doesn't take a genius to figure out how unfathomably disastrous this would be for basically every website, and as such, over 100,000 sites participated to varying degrees. For Newgrounds specifically, with relatively humble funding and staff, combined with the fucking stomach-churning edge of the average user, such legislation would have undoubtedly been the end, unless they wanted to return to a pre-Portal system where Tom sits at a PC personally approving every flash that goes up.
We don't go after the Postal Service or UPS when something is illegally shipped through that means of transportation. I don't think we should treat the internet differently.
The protest was a success, and to this day, users can enjoy fetish content of their favorite licensed characters. Later that year, the big redesign finally dropped, modernizing the site, but most importantly, allowing non-SWF files to be uploaded. Furthermore, later that year, games not made in Flash were enabled for upload, meaning Newgrounds was no longer wholly dependent on a single rapidly deteriorating program. The following year would be one of the worst for the site, with a costly audit and massive overhaul to the site's outdated code, leading to a substantial downsizing of staff. There was an attempt to introduce pre-roll ads, but the age and complexity of the site simply would not allow such a system, and it was scrapped after a short-lived trial. The downsizing mentioned would continue through 2014, and would also take the form of a physical renovation, culminating in the scrapping of physical servers and a complete move to cloud-based hosting. In February of 2015, Tom Fulp, Rice Pirate Mick Lauer, Stamper, and Spazkid did a panel at MagFest concerning Newgrounds.
But yeah, I still feel like we have something really cool going on. We just have to figure out the key to like get the people to see it as a shiny new thing again.
Yeah, it's over, man. You've
carried
had
on.
More than enough time to figure that out. It's all over, man.
We're still in the game, though.
This would be one of the first mentions of Nightmare Cops, still unnamed and shrouded in mystery.
Also working on an unannounced game with Johnny Utah from Newgrounds, who's in the audience. Over there with the hat. And Spazkid, too. And that's exciting.
I do love this panel because the way it's set up, you can't hear the audience questions. So there are just these breaks of dead silence where it looks like the hosts are having an existential crisis.
Okay. Oh, cool. Nice.
Another stage of the site's modernization was the rollout of a new monetization model that hopefully would remove the need for ads, introducing monthly subscriptions and putting an end to one of the site's biggest strifes since its creation. These monthly paid subscriptions gave subs a multitude of perks. A subscription system had existed for a few years before, but it was based on yearly time periods and had limited success. This reinvention was widely more popular and made the site sustainable for the foreseeable future. While Newgrounds had always been community-based, the community was now effectively positioned as the the lifeline of the site. In June of 2017, Nightmare Cops was publicly revealed for the first time, with a trailer and playable demo at San Diego Comic-Con.
This is Nightmare Cops, developed by Newgrounds, and you're cops who fight people's nightmares. It's a comedic run and brawl where you just beat up a lot of evil nightmare creatures.
In July of 2017, Adobe announced the discontinuation of Flash. This was generally foreseen due to the lack of support in the preceding years. Flash would still be usable up until New Year's Eve 2020, so Newgrounds had just under 3 years to prepare for the end of what was their foundational core. To prepare, 2 key programs were employed. The Newgrounds Player and Ruffle were both introduced in 2019 to emulate Flash, and ensure it could still run in browsers even when support ended entirely. Without these programs, we can only assume how much content would have been lost forever. And these aren't just useless yippee video games, they're little windows into history that allow us to see what people were saying and making back 25 years ago.
Weird. Can't anyone make a good game about killing that turban-wearing bastard?
Oh, jeez Louise. You know what, guys? Let's face it. The world's a dark place.
Go back up.
In October 2020, wait, oh fuck, I almost forgot. We can't make a video without the August 1st, 2019 incident. On August the 1st, during a Twitter spat with some other animators, Egoraptor Aaron Hansen made reference to the old school Newgrounds community, claiming the environment was hostile to new artists. From Aaron's wording, it's clear he's referring to more specific artists rather than the site itself, but it's a good indicator of how the site's atmosphere had changed over the past decade. It's an undeniable fact that Newgrounds wasn't always the most welcoming place, and could at times have a bit of a cool kids club atmosphere. For example, Stamper, one of the most senior members working at Newgrounds HQ, put a video making fun of another site user on the front page, solely because he thought it was funny.
That's when I fell in love with Corey. I told Tom to put it on the front page, and Tom was like, I don't know, this is mean. And I was like, put it on the front page, Tom.
I know, I always felt guilty about it, but it was like a masterpiece at the same time.
By today's standards, something like that is insane. A website moderator effectively condoning the harassment of another user. But again, I think this just represents how independent Newgrounds was. They weren't beholden to any corporate idea of user well-being. And you know, the video was pretty funny. In October 2020, as a project for a 72-hour game jam competition, Ninja Muffin, Phantom Arcade, Evil Skater, and Kawaii Sprite created the rhythm game Friday Night Funkin'. While on the surface the game seemed like a fairly conventional rhythm game, in terms of visual presentation, it was the personification of what many now describe as the Newgrounds style, and in many ways was the project that cemented the style as a keystone of internet art. Following the game jam, Friday Night Funkin' was released onto Newgrounds, taking full advantage of all the systems that the site had introduced up until then. The game was received well by Newgrounds users, but somewhat surprisingly broke free of the constraints of the site, and into the eerie world of fandom culture. I'm sure it was in part due to the fun, accessible gameplay, but like 90% it was because there were little characters you could ship and maybe make an OC. It also helped that the game was free, so you didn't have to ask mummy or daddy to buy it for you. Pico found a second life in the game, being featured as a character, and I found people on the Friday Night Funkin' Reddit having discourse about his morality. I'm not bashing this, by the way. I think it's incredible that a game made in under 72 hours has led to people feeling so deeply about its characters. In the years following its release, the game's community exploded, helped by the ability to make mods for the game, resulting in some f***ing wild creations. They got a Lila Seraphim collab? What the fuck is this shit? If they made this many mistakes in real life, their fans would tell them to kill themselves. The following year, in January of 2021, Adobe officially ended support for Flash, meaning anything made in Flash would theoretically no longer work. However, thanks to Ruffle and the Newgrounds player, Newgrounds was relatively unscathed, with the average user likely not experiencing any real difference in browsing, save for an occasional additional loading screen and a handful of games that took longer than expected to work in the emulator. On April 18th, 2021, an update for Friday Night Funkin' released exclusively on Newgrounds. The update ended up crashing the site due to the volume of users, signaling that Newgrounds still had the ability to display its relevance. Since then, Friday Night Funkin' started a Kickstarter and has begun development of a full-scale game release for major consoles and PC. They also released a mobile port earlier this year, and while the fandom isn't as prevalent as it was a few years back, the game is still frequently discussed and the community is still active as ever. The following years generally saw minimal changes to the site, save for aesthetic tweaks, security overhauls, and the introduction of an age verification system, including blocking all UK users from using adult content. Damn it.
I want to say a big you.
There was also an observable growing nostalgia for early Newgrounds, and a new visual style would emerge attempting to recapture the visual edge of early Flash cartoons. Newgrounds truly had come full circle, with users feeling nostalgic for the choppy animation and terrible audio quality that was commonplace on the site throughout the early 2000s.
Hey,
Don't you think we've spent enough time together this summer?
The funny thing with the Newgrounds style is that no one really seems to be in agreement as to what components actually make up this art style. But I think that's sort of the point. Newgrounds animation has always been throw fucking everything at the wall. When talking about the emergence of the Newgrounds style, you of course have to mention Smiling Friends. I've seen people get very upset at the suggestion that Smiling Friends is an example of the Newgrounds style, but there are so many internet-specific animation details that I think it's impossible to deny that Newgrounds isn't a major inspiration, and its popularity no doubt reignited some interest in the site, and the actual possibility that making content on there can actually lead to real IRL careers. In January of 2025, filmmaker Connor Nyberg released a trailer for his upcoming feature-length documentary, Once Upon a Time on the Internet, a documentary that aimed to tell the complete story of Newgrounds, from its mid-2000s boom through to its current survival on a corporate-dominated internet. I can't believe he ripped off my video idea a year earlier. The trailer featured interviews from a variety of Newgrounds heavy hitters, such as Rice Pirate, Rubber Ross, and the voice of Aaron Hansen. One selling point was the procurement of exclusive footage from an unspecified 2009 project. Using my L-tier deductive abilities, I recognize this footage from the Lost The Crown documentary, despite it being presumed destroyed when The Crown disappeared. It seems somehow Connor was able to obtain this footage to use in his own project. So if you did pledge back in 2009, I guess it's at least a small consolation that your funding will be going to something. As for the funding of Once Upon a Time on the Internet itself, it too used Kickstarter, with a goal of $80,000. It shot past that target and now has a backing of $110,000. A fairly decent budget for an indie documentary. I just did this for free, I didn't need no $80,000. What did it cost me? My marriage? It makes more sense to make a Newgrounds documentary now rather than back in 2009, as things on the site are finally slowing down, so it's easier to look back and tell a broader narrative. And that more or less takes us up to now. As of today, Nightmare Cops remains in development, with no release date scheduled. It's strange, I can't think of a single other game that's this mysterious without being branded in development hell. But the devs have mastered the art of giving followers just enough to make it 100% clear development is still ongoing. It's a wonderful art, more game devs should take notes. The release of Nightmare Cops will probably be the single most significant event for Newgrounds of this decade, or the next decade if they don't hustle. Even though it's far too large in scope to be hosted on Newgrounds, it represents the total coalescence of everything the website has stood for. As I said at the beginning, this video has only scratched the surface of Newgrounds. I could make a whole other video just about the behind-the-scenes coding of the site, or about the lives and careers of its most prolific users, or if I wanted to be really pretentious, a retrospective on the cultural impact of the site. But Newgrounds is simply so big and so important, it's pretty much impossible to cram all that information into a single digestible video. But I hope today I've given you just enough information to appreciate Newgrounds a little more, since despite everything it's done for the internet and online culture, it has for the most part gone pretty unthanked. With the internet rapidly changing again, Newgrounds' future is still uncertain. In my heart of hearts, looking at the current trends of the internet, I don't think Newgrounds can continue to grow. Nightmare Cops could therefore be the final major Newgrounds game, and I think that would be a fantastic note to end on. A final grand showcase of the style and aesthetics that were brewed by the community over 20 years, and a middle finger to the woke mob who try and tell me what tragedies are inappropriate to joke about. Whether or not Nightmare Cops reinvigorates interest in the site, for aspiring game devs and animators, Newgrounds is still pretty much the only place to start out and actually receive positive feedback, rather than places like Twitter or YouTube, where if it isn't Ghibli or shitty f***ing AI, then it's garbage and you're a lazy animator. So for the time being, the site has a future. We can only hope that it's a long one. It took some time to realize, but Newgrounds is a stand-up game.